What's up, listeners? It's Andrea. Today, we welcome you to the TNG Thanksgiving Feast. We continue to crap on Chief O'Brien, and we ask the question, wouldn't you want to be friends with Hugh? Grab some gravy and come nerd out with us.
Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the number one place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
Hey, I'm your co-host, Andrea. Shereese, I'm so excited. Today, we're breaking down Season 5, Episode 23, I, Borg, which was written by Renee Echevarria and directed by Robert Lederman. The discovery of an injured adolescent Borg brings to the surface hard feelings for both Captain Picard and Guinan for what the Borg Collective has done to them. Matters are complicated when plans to use the young Borg to destroy his people are halted when it is discovered that the Borg has become an individual. This is one of the all-time greats. What are your initial thoughts?
My initial thoughts were, oh my gosh, this is the one with Hugh. This is going to be so good. That's all I wrote. I was just like so excited to rewatch this one.
Yes. I wrote OMG. I love this episode, but the OMG has like 3, 6, 9 G's behind it. I was like, OMG, G, I love this episode. We're pulling 9 G's today on the OMG scale.
This is a 9G kind of episode.
Mm-hmm. It's got everything. It brings back the Borg, which are like the perfect foe.
Yeah.
It churns up the feelings of resentment with Picard.
Mm-hmm.
We get Guinan to swing by and pay us a visit.
And we get Guinan in a mood, which we never get.
Guinan in a mood. Yeah.
She is the most accepting, loving. I mean, she's the only one who's friends with Ensign Ro. She is just like, she gets along with everybody, right? And then with this, she's questioning people acting humanely in any way. In any way, shape, or form. She's saying it's wrong, it's dangerous, it's foolish. And you're just like, who is this woman? Yes. It's got everything, and it's got real dilemmas, like real hard choices to make.
Yes. And it has like great sets that we haven't seen for a while, like the bio med bay.
Yes.
You know, where it's like, oh my God.
The lab where we saw Lal.
Yeah, where we saw Lal.
The planet. We haven't been to a good icy rocky planet in a minute. That was
not
nice.
For a while. We haven't seen a crash for a while. There hasn't been an exposed brain since we met John Doe. Yeah. Luckily, this time Beverly was like, "I've learned my lesson. I'm not going to squish anything right on the open brain."
Well, plus he's already dead, so we're not going to put
no
anything
worries.
on this open brain.
Absolutely no worries at all. For the Borg, lots of worries, but not for Beverly.
But luckily for us, the Borg don't worry, so we're good.
Yeah. It's a worry-free conundrum. It's perfect. Anyway, this episode is so great, and we are really, I feel like we've arrived at Thanksgiving dinner. You know, like the next few episodes that we have rounding out the end of season 5 are just so unbelievably strong. I love these episodes with all my heart. You know, we got past cost of living. Thank God that thing was over. Let's put it out to pasture and shoot it. Like, I never want to see that thing again. But we have I, Borg, and then next week we have the next phase.
Yes,
and
one of our faves.
It's like there's just
we've got Inner Light coming up. I mean, which is just so iconic.
We have arrived at Thanksgiving. This is the Thanksgiving feast of TNG right here. Like, grab a seat. There's plenty of gravy to go around because
welcome to the feast.
Oh my God. Yeah. We've gone through all the awkward chit chat with the like accidentally racist uncle or whatever the F. Like, we've gotten through all that shit, and now it's just time to eat potatoes and gravy. This is the fruits of our labor, which is not our labor at all, as it turns out. We're just commenting on other people's hard labor, but this is amazing. Okay. How's that for a digression?
That's the analogy that just keeps giving. So this episode starts moving on to delicious feast. This episode starts on the bridge, and we see these are they called solar flares? These eruptions coming from a star.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. I was like, wow. I think it was maybe all of 3 seconds of screen time. And I was like, I actually go back to that. Yeah, it opened with these like
Troy was like beautiful.
And I was like, what's she talking about?
I looked down to my laptop for 2 seconds and I was like, what beautiful? Okay.
It was gorgeous. It was like kind of reminded me of that episode we had before with the neutron star, and it was like the blue star and the like red star or whatever, and they were swirling. Yes. And it was really pretty. It was kind of like that. It's just these beautiful like fiery explosions, but it's there for about 10 seconds. And then we discover that there is a distress call coming from a small moon near this star. Actually, we don't know it's a distress call. We know there's a signal. And they're saying, well, potentially it's a distress signal because of its proximity to this star, and we're kind of in the middle of nowhere. So Picard's like, all right, let's go check it out. So Riker, Worf, and Beverly beam down because it could, there could be somebody hurt. Yes. These moments always kind of freak me out a little bit because I'm like, you never know what you're going to find when you just beam into a random place with a random signal. Like, you guys are the easiest people to capture, I have to say. Because there's like one security guard,
100%,
and your first officer too, and your chief medical officer. Okay. Well, anyways, that's how they roll. They only send the best and brightest to every little emergency. So we get this
Berkeley. He's probably not doing anything. Send him down.
Where's Chief O'Brien? He could be here. This could be the perfect job for him. He never has anything to do. This could be for him. So anyways, they get down to this planet.
I love how much we hate on Chief O'Brien. He's not even in this episode and we're already shitting on him.
No.
What's he doing?
Because
Nothing.
he spent all of season 2 bouncing in and out of random scenes. And now it's season 5. We haven't seen him probably since season 2.
Imagine if like Colmini actually heard our podcast and he's like, what do these women have against Chief O'Brien? God.
We have nothing against the actor. We have everything against Chief O'Brien. He just was just not pulling his weight in TNG. But as we have said in the past, he crushes it in DS9. He's a legit player. He's got a role. He does important stuff. And the whole space station would fall apart without him. TNG, not so much. Apparently anyone could push the button in the transporter room.
Yeah, so, I can do it. It's
fine. Targ could do it, apparently. Anyone could do this, which is good to know.
Yeah. Our Tarkasian razor beast from last week.
Tarkasian razor beast.
Guinan's like, I got that imaginary friend action. Here.
Right. Isabella could push the button. Not that she needs it. Not that she needs it.
We're really dumping on this dude, okay?
So we're going to have a lot of editing to do for this episode.
No, we won't. I'm leaving all of this in. This is all magic. And we're so sorry. It's like 30 minutes into the podcast and we still haven't gotten to like
anything.
Yeah, no, nothing.
So they find a Borg. The end. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But they find a Borg, and at this moment, it's a really big deal that they, remove some shrapnel and they find this Borg drone that's still alive. And I actually think in this episode, they never used the word drone, so they weren't even using that language yet. But they find this Borg drone, and it's really dramatic, and it goes to commercial because you're like, shoot, what do we do? We just found someone who's still alive. But this someone is part of the most dangerous species we have ever encountered. And we know that the Borg come back and collect their dead. So we know the Borg are probably on their way right now. And so we need to get out of here and we need to leave this person because we could die. But then, of course, Beverly's like, we're not going to leave someone who's near death. We have to help them. It is a legitimate conundrum. And it kind of feels like, and they mentioned a lot in this episode being at war, right? It's kind of like being at war and then you find an enemy combatant in their full uniform and everything. So they're the enemy combatant and they're like half dying on your back porch, but you're a doctor. And they're like, shoot, they're the enemy, but they're also a person who's dying. And what do you do and what can you live with? Because it's easy to tell somebody else what to do. It's a whole nother thing for you to watch this child die because he's the quote unquote enemy. This was a really, really good one. I also thought, and I'd love to get your opinion on just like this first kind of opening scene, but just as I was sitting there going like, should we save him or should we leave him? I also did not remember at all that Hugh was an adolescent, that he was a teenager. I did not remember that. I thought he was an adult. So I was like, ooh, like, yeah.
I remember him being young. He was probably like 18 or something.
I didn't remember that. So I was like, that makes it worse, right? Because now you're like, and it's a child, it makes it just, it adds
worse.
Yeah.
It's even worse. So 100%, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, the way that they staged this rescue was quite dramatic and wonderful. First of all, like the Borg shuttlecraft, whatever it was, like a mini cube, a micro cube, whatever they want to call it. It was crashed and it was pretty torn apart in a lot of places. That was one thing. But Hugh was only visible by his legs sticking out from under like a panel that had crushed him. So it was very like Wizard of Oz with the witch, like in her feet sticking out. And when they lifted the panel and realized he was still alive and just an adolescent, it was like, what do you do now? Naturally, Picard has these really strong feelings about beaming a Borg on board. And it's like, you can't have that. Do you not remember who they are? You know, and of course, Beverly's like, I can't leave a dying man to just, you know, and Worf is like, let's just kill it and make it look like it was part of the accident. And I think that sort of cold-bloodedness is when Picard was like, wait, no.
That was exactly the moment, because Picard was like, leave it, screw it, who cares? Don't pay any attention, pretend like we were never there, because they'll come and chase us if they know we were here. And then when Worf lays out the plan of like, aha, we have to erase our tracks in that case. Yeah. Then that's exactly the moment when Picard's like, fine, beam it on.
We can't do that.
We can't do that. Now he sees like where his line of thinking actually leads, which is pretty brutal.
Like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. Right. And I'm not like knocking on Worf, because like as a Klingon, he probably would have made sure he was dead. Right? If it was a bunch of Klingons who came upon their enemy, they'd be like, let me stab him one more time so he could die victoriously in battle. Right?
Yeah.
But as a human, it's like, oh, we can't be so bloodthirsty. But I also thought, like, is Picard really afraid of just one drone? Like, if he tries to assimilate anyone on board, they could just beam him into space.
No,
like there's no threat from this one.
It's not that. It's that Picard, having been one of them, knows that the Borg are coming, and that his entire ship is at risk now because the Borg are coming. So it's not that one Borg. Yeah, it's like, let's just keep him in a detention facility. Like, throw him in the brig and call it a day. Like, that's easy. You know,
I mean, I didn't know what to do with him. I just thought he was afraid of the one, but that actually makes more sense.
No,
he's like we have to get the ship out of here.
Yeah,
but we can't take the drone with us. He's afraid of
the ramifications. Exactly. So, you know, Troy has reached the point of the show where she's really killer at her job. So she immediately comes to Picard's ready room to talk with him, but he is far too deep in his denial to face what she's saying, where she's like, you know, I know that this must stir up quite a deal of feelings with you. And if there's one word that Picard does not have in his vocabulary, is the word feelings. He's like, nope, I don't have those. I was not they're not part of my programming. Right. So he shuts her down super fast, but because she's really good at her job, she also knows that there's no point in trying to push him on this. When you're in denial, you can howl at the moon all night long and you're never going to hear anything back. Like he's too far in. He can't hear her. So she's like, okay, well, I'm not going to waste my breath. And she's like, well, if you do have any feelings about this, find me, you know, and he's like, I will. Or if
anything comes up, I assure you, I will come to find you. If anything happens, which I absolutely will not. Yeah, nothing will happen because I'm fine. Okay, I'm fine. You're like, all right. Yeah, I think you convinced me.
Yeah, you totally convinced me.
Yeah, Troy was really clutch. Like, I do appreciate how she approached him and the fact that she didn't push it, and everything she said made total sense. And I'm sure he understood it made total sense and didn't care because he couldn't hear it and he didn't want to hear it.
Yeah. So we have this like sick bay set up in the detention center,
which is so cool. This is the first time they've ever done something like this.
I do love the sickbay set up like in the brig, because they know that he's a Borg, and like when he gets up and running, he can attack one guy and they can shoot at him, but then the next time somebody tries to shoot at him, he'll have an adaptation. So it's like
they're only going to get one shot, so it's got to be a really good shot.
So Captain comes to see this unconscious Borg, and he's got a whole lot of feelings. He is angry and he's unsure, and there's just a whole bunch of stuff that he's like, fudge, like this is not who I want on my like ship right now. And Picard does ask Geordi like if he knows enough about the Borg for him to access the Borg's root command, which I was like, oh, that's actually brilliant. His plan is to try to introduce an invasive programming sequence into its chip. And so when this adolescent is released back to the Borg, it infects the entire community. And I was like, whoa, I don't remember this portion of the episode at all. And I've seen it like a million times. And like I watched this and I was like, holy crap, that is like the perfect weapon. It really is.
It is. And my first thought was like, that is a beast of a bioweapon. And then my second thought was, and that's genocide. Like you were talking about eliminating every single individual in their entire population. That's crazy. Like that's not a battle. We have a battle and it's us versus you and like your ship blows up and that's really sad. It's like, I am going to destroy every last one of you from existence. And I just thought that's a lot. And I was like, is that fair in love and war? You know, is that saying like, well, all is fair, just genocide's A-okay. It seemed really extreme, even especially for Picard, right? Who's more of like the diplomat. Yeah. And I thought this to me felt like way too far and way too much. But it wasn't just me. It wasn't just me. Beverly agreed. And then that's the whole discussion throughout the episode is this morally a good idea? And really they center it more around Hugh becoming more of an individual and how that makes it feel different than if you think of them as, you know, all the things that Picard calls them as, like just bugs or insects or just rope, like just not non-human, basically, is why he feels justified in committing genocide, because he does not consider them to be people. So then it's okay to kill them all because they're not really people.
Everybody is on board with this plan except Beverly. I was like, even Troy is on board with this plan. And of course, Beverly's like, no, like this isn't cool. Like, this is a person. And of course, Picard's like, it's not a person. It's a thing. It could have once been a human or some other alien, but like, it's Borg now. And you know what the Borg do? They just destroy. So like, this is what we're going to do. So,
and I'm also still fine. I'm totally fine, by the way.
Okay. Yeah, stop asking if I'm fine. So the Borg has regained consciousness, and it's just a teenager, and he's so lost, and he's trying to find an access panel in the, an access terminal in the brig. And Geordi's like, oh, wait, they don't eat like biological food. They synthesize something from like a terminal.
Yeah, it was actually Beverly who pointed that out because Geordi and maybe somebody else who was there, or Worf, whoever was there, they were saying like, look at him, he must be looking for weaknesses, or, what's he searching for, looking all around. And Beverly was like, he must be hungry. And everyone stopped and looked at her like, what? Because they're seeing him as this enemy who's dangerous and who's just looking for a way to attack them. And then she explains they don't actually eat. They synthesize everything they need. So he's probably looking. Right. He said, but they do need energy. Oh, it's Picard was there. And Geordi, yeah. They do need energy in order to create food. So then Picard grudgingly looks over at Geordi and is like, create something so he can eat. And
he says, like, okay. He says arrange to feed it. And I was like, dang, Picard.
Yeah, because he wasn't even
You're definitely not feeling some sort of way about it. Okay.
Yeah. And Beverly's the only one who saw that he must be hungry. He must be scared.
Yes. And like this poor Borg kid looks so scared. I was like, oh my God. It just broke my heart. Now we immediately cut to this scene where two people are fencing, and I was like, oh, cool. It's like the return of like the fencing auditorium or whatever it is. And it's Picard and Guinan. And as they sit down to take a little break and towel themselves off with non-absorbent towels, she brings up the Borg, and she tells Picard that the Borg are going to come after them for bringing this Borg aboard. And Picard's like, I don't know. We're just, let's see how it goes. And they end up sparring again. But this time, Guinan gets hurt, and she's like, ow, oh my gosh. And when Picard goes, are you all right? She immediately stabs him like with the foil and gets the point. And she says, you felt sorry for me, and look where it got you. And it was like, as usual, Guinan knows how to land a point, no pun intended. Like, she really knows how to like get through.
However, I would argue the scenario is a little bit different, Guinan. This Borg was not sitting there and wait, trying to trick them so that way he could come and get them or something. He was just dying, and they saved him. And now that they saved him, they could have there was the total option where Beverly repaired all of his injuries and put him back on the planet and kept him moving. But Picard had the bright idea of turning him into a walking bomb. So it's not the same. It's not the same.
That's a good point. Because
I see her point of saying, like, don't get too attached or what. Don't lower your defenses. Yeah. But like, Picard was not being as soft as I think she thought he was. She was just appalled that he was entertaining notions of keeping it alive at all.
At all. Yeah, you're right about that.
Because her trauma is even more than Picard's trauma.
Oh, yeah. She lost like her whole species to the Borg. Yeah. Now, Geordi, in the meantime, while this fencing match was happening, Geordi made a little terminal that interfaces with like something from the Enterprise. And so, he puts it in the cell, and the Borg plugs in to feed. And he was hungry, because he's like immediately like, from all this energy he's getting.
Which, by the way, can we just pause and say that is the coolest technology I've ever heard of?
Oh yeah, and it's like on the side of your hand, so it's just like a little. It's like a plug. You just plug it in.
Yeah, I just really love these little nuances of like they create their own food inside their body using electricity. What?
Yeah, that's so cool. It's super cool. So as Beverly and Geordi work with him, we discover that his designation is third of 5, and he ends up asking Beverly what a doctor is, and he keeps telling them that they will be assimilated. And he says, "What is your designation?" They say Beverly and Geordi, and Beverly goes, "You," and then third of 5 goes, "You," and Geordi's like, "Wait, Hugh," which I was like, "Oh, that's actually a really nice, like, easy transition into this name." And it turns out he's nothing like what they expected. He describes like being lonely without the others, like there's no other voices, and like they're really, these few people are really starting to have some second thoughts about this mission.
Yeah, Beverly was never on board at all. But Geordi's starting to get off board. He's starting to be like, oh, I don't know. He was kind of like Data, he's just learning, he's growing, he's got lots of questions. Man, I don't know about destroying him.
Cyborgs and like androids have such an affinity for Geordi. I don't know what it is, but man, they do love him. But
at least somebody loves him. Somebody chose Geordi. You're worth it, buddy.
He is. But you know who's not on board with all this? Everybody's getting soft as Guinan. She is like, you need to get it together. This is a Borg. He will destroy all of us, and then he'll go find our families and destroy them, and he'll destroy any teachers we had in school also, and he'll also destroy them, right? Like, she's just like, this is gonna just be a shit show, and everybody's over here being like, he's an individual. There are no individuals. Get it together. Yeah. She is extremely angry.
Yeah, Geordi goes to chat with her in 10 Forward, and when Geordi mentions Hugh, she's like, what? And he's like, oh yeah, that's what his name is now. And she's like, oh, you're naming it like a pet? She's just like appalled that there's any humanization whatsoever of this quote unquote monster that's part of the people who destroyed her people. And so Geordi really takes it in stride. He's not offended. He doesn't defend Hugh or the Borg or anything. He just goes, maybe you should go meet him for yourself. And, Guinan's like, why would I want to do that? She's like, no, no. He says, he says, maybe you should go talk to Hugh yourself and make your own opinion instead of just kind of going off of what's in your head of what you think about the Borg. And Guinan's like, I wouldn't have anything to say, which is like, so not Guinan, right? She's got all this sauce. And he goes, well, why don't you just listen? That's what you do, right? You're a listener. And I was like, ooh,
that's what you do best.
Yeah, so Guinan couldn't really turn down that challenge because she didn't even have to talk. All she had to do was just listen.
Yeah.
And to her credit, she does. She actually goes to meet Hugh, which is, she could have just not.
She could have not. She could have been like, shows what you know, and she couldn't have gone, but she did. And she kind of explains like, your people destroyed my people, and resistance is not futile. Like, we resist every day, and the few of us that are left will continue to resist, but like, you destroyed us. And like, he understands that she's lonely because she has no home, and he says, we are also lonely. And he's still using we, but he's saying like, he's lonely. And even Guinan is like having a hard time holding on to her hatred. It's like,
and when she says like, resistance is not futile, he goes, it's not. Like, he's learning. He didn't know it wasn't futile. He thought it was futile. That's what that's all he's been programmed to do. So he's getting all these new thoughts, and he's nothing like what she expected either. She wanted some monster that she could throw all her venom at, and instead she sees this scared kid who's still learning who he is. And she's like, shoot, I want to hate him, and I'm finding it very hard to want to hate and murder him. I'm finding it very, very hard.
Yes, it is. It's becoming harder and harder to hate him. And like, he's so lovable and sweet, like as sweet as you can say a Borg is, but he really is just like so lovable. This is a storytelling magnum opus right here. You have taken the most hated enemy in Star Trek and made them human and made them relatable and lovable, and somebody who you want to go to bat for. And it's like, that is absolutely artistic work. It blows my mind.
Yes. And then we take the cuteness factor up to level 3000. when we see them back in the law lab, and it's Hugh and Geordi, and Geordi's studying this and studying that, doing what he does. And Hugh's asking him a bunch of questions like, why are you studying me? Why do you need to know this? Why do you need to know that? And it's really cute because they have this little exchange where Geordi's like, well, I just need to know as much about you as I can. And Hugh says, we assimilate people when we want to get to know them. Wouldn't that be easier? Why don't you just do that? And Geordi's like, no, I'm good. Like, I have no desire to be assimilated, and gives him this whole speech about being an individual and why that's so important to him, and how losing that individuality is worse than dying. And he was just soaking it all in, like, so you don't want to be who are these people who don't want to be assimilated? Because not only do the Borg say resistance is futile, apparently they legitimately believe that everyone wants to be assimilated. Why wouldn't they want to be assimilated? Why would they want to have only their thoughts in their mind and not everyone else's thoughts? Yeah. So then he says, well, what about being lonely? You know, like, you don't have all the thoughts in your head. And then Geordi says, that's why we have friends, which I really appreciate also, because this could be an easy spot where it's like, that's why you have to fall in love and get married, right? It could have taken that turn and it would have been a little inauthentic coming from Geordi. So I appreciate that they said friends. And he says, that's why you have friends. They're people that help keep you from being lonely. Yes. And then Hugh, you see Hugh just get it. He goes, oh, like Geordi and Hugh, like they are friends. And you're like, oh my gosh. And the whole time while he's scanning, it's like, I'm trying to turn you into a bomb, you know, like, it's gotta be tough.
You know, Geordi does go to Picard and he's like, I've gotten to know Hugh. I'm having some second thoughts about releasing this invasive program. And Picard is like, I suggest you stow it and proceed with your duty. And Geordi's like, Roger that, I guess. Like, okay. You know, it's like, dang.
This is why the military is not for me.
This
is why, right?
Because I'm like, that's so funny. I still have my individual thoughts. I don't want to listen to what you're... Okay. Anyway. But like in his quarters at night, Guinan pops by for a visit, and even she admits that Hugh is different.
But and what Picard's I love, though, is she's like, she wants him to convince her, right? Like, convince me that this is the right thing to do, because I thought it was the right thing to do, and I still totally hate the Borg, but I'm having a hard time. I need you to just go run it by me one more time. Like, give me Rob back up, because I lost that crazy fiery passion. I lost my rile.
Yes. Yeah. And Picard's like, he's not a person. He's a Borg, damn it. And like, he is just really trying to keep this distance from Hugh. And this is when Guinan says, have you talked to him? And he's like, why would I talk to it? Like, why would I do that? He's
the same thing Guinan said. I have nothing to say to it.
I have nothing to say. Right. But Guinan says, if you are going to send this Borg on a suicide mission and you're never going to look him in the eye, that's shitty.
Yeah.
Like, and she said it in a much more eloquent way than I'm saying it, but it's like, if you're going to doom this man to this fate, you'd better look him in the eye at least once. And I was like,
and the way she said
thank you, Guinan.
And like, I feel like that's the only thing she could have said, the only way she could have said it to sway him. Because when you put it like that, how could he say no?
I mean, you're putting it in like Picard terms, where even Picard cannot argue that. Now, it clearly got through to Picard because Picard agrees to have Worf and Hugh beamed into his ready room. But he immediately tells Worf to wait outside. So it's like, okay. But Hugh recognizes Picard as Locutus immediately. And I had forgotten this part. And I was like, that's right.
That was crazy. Because as soon as he sees him, he's like, oh, Locutus. And you just see Picard like it's almost like, yes. It's this horrible trauma that he doesn't want to relive. He doesn't want Troy's help in getting through it at all. And now it's just like, boom, reopen the wound instantly. Like, the memory of who you are is still in the collective, which is nuts.
Yes. And Picard goes full method actor and plays the part of Locutus. And Hugh says that resistance is not futile and that the crew are his friends. And he says, no, Geordi will be assimilated. They will all be assimilated. Resistance is futile. And Hugh says he doesn't want them to be assimilated, and they don't want to be assimilated. They would rather die.
Sweet the way that he was like, when Locutus was like, they will all be assimilated, Hugh goes, even Geordi? He's like, yes, Geordi will also be assimilated, but Geordi doesn't wish it. It's like Geordi was that point of connection with all mankind, to be the one kind of lighthouse for Hugh. To be like, well, if Geordi doesn't wish it, then the others probably don't wish it either, and it shouldn't be done.
Well, and Picard says, you will assist me in assimilating all of them. And he says, I will not. And Picard goes, what did you say? And he says, I will not help you. And he goes, and Picard is freaked out at this point. Cause it's like, now there's no more we. It's always been we. Now there's just an I will not help you. And it's just, they have the senior staff meeting in the observation lounge, and Picard is like, okay, obviously something is happening here. And it's sort of like an evolution, like it's a next step of the Borg. And like, we can't destroy Hugh.
Thank God for this moment. Oh my gosh. In this moment, I was like, phew. But I also was like, wow, mad props to Picard for being big enough to say I was wrong. Mm-hmm. I don't know if honestly, if I was in his same position where I'm the captain of the flagship and I've made this call where we're going to end the war against the Borg and this is how we're going to do it. And I've been like dead set on it and all this stuff. I have Geordi preparing it and Data preparing it and we're ready to deploy him. If I was confronted with the knowledge that this is probably not the right way to go, I don't know if I'd be big enough to be like, you know what? I made a mistake. We need to pick a different way. Yeah. I think I'd be like, hey, all the wheels are in motion. We're going to end this war. Put him down on the planet.
You know what? That's the thing. It's like, it reminds me kind of a lot of like people who get cold feet at their wedding and maybe know that it's not a good choice for them, but they still go through with the wedding because it's like, because everybody's here already.
They're literally at the wedding. Yeah. And you're like, I can't say no now.
Yeah, it's like, you actually can. You can say no at any time.
And it's better to say no now than to get married and then get annulled in 3 weeks.
Whole thing. Yeah, get to do that whole thing. Yeah, no. But like, Picard has a thought. Because Riker's like, why don't we just wipe his memory and drop him back off at the crash site? But Beverly's like, wait a minute. If you wipe his memory, though, you will wipe away like all of the stuff that he's learned and the individualism that he's picked up and like his personality. Like, you can't do that. And
which is another hard decision.
Yes. But somebody else on the crew says, either way, like when he gets picked up by the Borg, they will wipe his memory. And Picard's like, but if we let him go back to the Borg as he is, perhaps, just maybe, that individuality, the individualistic sort of identity that he's created may spread among just a few Borg in the time it takes for them to like take him to like the memory wiping department, whatever, right? So it's like that might end up spreading a little bit at a time, and that might be way more invasive than any kind of program we were going to create. And like, we're also allowing Hugh to be Hugh. And I love that. And I want to know your thoughts on that, because there was a little bit of that speech about like retaining his individuality.
I think that was a genius move. Again, I don't think I would have come up with that solution. That was just
same.
It was like the perfect solution. It solves everything. We're not erasing who he is. I do think, at the end of the day, they were going to have to return him. I mean, they did have this conversation where Beverly at the end of this whole thing says, we haven't asked, what does he want? Does Hugh even want to go back? Mm-hmm. Because if he doesn't, that's a whole different thing. Because as an individual, that means he has rights, right?
Yeah.
But just barring that, we're going to have to return him one way or another. His memory is probably going to get wiped one way or another, but he will lose everything that he's gained. And what's even the point? But I feel like even if Hugh did immediately lose all of his individuality the second the Borg came back for him, I think the benefit is that Picard and the rest of the crew did not lose their humanity.
Yes, absolutely right.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And Picard's like, well, okay, let's ask Hugh what he wants to do. And Hugh says, I would choose to stay with Geordi because Picard, I never thought I would live to see the day that Picard would offer asylum to a Borg.
Mm-hmm. All people.
I would have loved so much for the story to take a different turn where the Borg ends up staying and like becoming like a valuable part of the crew, which I guess they do explore that in Voyager.
That's the exact point of 7 of 9 is to continue that story.
Yeah.
That we never got in TNG.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he says, I would choose to stay with Geordi. But Hugh knows that it would be too dangerous to stay on board with his new friends because the Borg are going to continue to look for him. So he knows he has to leave. And I was like,
and even that's powerful, right? Because it could have been, well, I want to stay with Geordi, but I belong with my people, so I'm going back to the planet or something like that. But what it was is I want to stay with Geordi, but I don't want to put him in danger. So it was a selfless, sacrificial act for him to go back to the Borg. So even that is very human, that self-sacrifice. Sweet. And it's not Borg at all. Borg don't self-sacrifice that way because they're all kind of expendable. So that was really powerful. And I love that they take this storyline and do it with 7 of 9 and Voyager, because it's a story we need to have. We just need this story. We need to know what happens when a Borg drone is with the Federation and is no longer, for whatever reasons, able to go back to the collective. What happens? I'm glad we did get that. And honestly, the way that the Borg are developed in Voyager is so spectacular. It's like they take all of the seeds from TNG and just ramp it up, and they take you where you're like, oh, what would happen? And oh my gosh, what would happen if there was an enemy even worse than the Borg? They'd show you that. What would happen if there were adolescents and children Borg? What would happen if there was a bunch of Borg who were Borg, but then they all got their individuality back, but then they realized that some of them were from warring species? What would happen then? Like, they really take this idea to some really interesting places, but it all really starts here. This is our first episode where the Borg are seen as more than just mindless drones. And it's really, really powerful.
It is. It's so powerful. And as they prepare to say goodbye, Geordi wants to accompany Hugh down to the surface. And Picard's like, I think that'll be okay, because the Borg assimilate civilizations, not individuals. And in parting, Hugh says, Captain, I do not want to forget that I am Hugh. And I was like, oh God, this is so sad. It reminded me a lot of like LOL. It's just like a new person, like learning what it is to be human.
And then getting it snatched away within like 24 hours.
I know.
Yeah.
And like the Enterprise chooses to stay like close to this one of the suns, which blocks them from the Borg sensor, so they'll be all right. And Geordi and Hugh say goodbye. And he says, goodbye, Geordi. I will try to remember you. And I was like, oh my gosh. And the Borg beam down and pick up Hugh, and they pick up kind of the pieces of their like fallen comrades. And as the 3 of them beam away, Hugh takes like the last little look at Geordi, like as he's in the transport, like warp. And I just wrote, I'm not crying. I'm not crying.
You're not crying.
Like, I can't watch this episode without crying. It's so beautiful.
I was boohoo crying at the end. I was boohoo crying.
Every time.
It's such an emotional roller coaster in all the best ways, because you just want happiness for everyone, you know, and you just don't want this kid to be used to commit genocide and also be destroyed. And you want everybody to end up like on a good foot, on a good note. And it kind of does. Like, the Borg go along with their day, the Enterprise goes along with their day, and they live to fight it again. But this episode was just really like a turning point in what does it mean to be Borg? Can we really just see them as ants or insects that are evil, that need to be stamped out, or not? And it's just really, really, really good episode.
It is such a great episode. I love it so much. It's one of my all-time favorites. It's up there like top 3 or top 5. 100%. And I feel like I've said that for like 20 episodes, but really, like, I've, you know, as we're getting to the end of season 5, we only have 2 seasons left of this podcast. So I was thinking like, oh, I should make a list of like my top 10 or top 15 favorite episodes. And this one is way up there, and it's hard to put them all in order. I'm just going to kind of put a list up on our Instagram of like favorite episodes for myself, and I invite you to make a episode list of like top 5 or 10 or 20 favorite episodes, because this really is like Thanksgiving Feast. It's just the best episode. It's got like such humanity from such an inhumane character. Like, it's, you know, it even freaking Guinan changes her mind.
Yes.
Come on.
We have that. I mean, that was well put. We have such humanity from such an inhuman character. And then we have the opposite. We have such like just vicious, cold-hearted, and cold-blooded behavior from people who are usually the really empathetic ones. And they're the ones who are like, man, screw this. You know, and they're all about that life of just destruction and stuff, which is so unlike them, but also is not way out there. Like, when you hear them talking, you're like, it does make logical sense. You know, you're not like, that's crazy. You're like, you're like, well, I mean, it is the Borg. This is literally the only weapon you've ever had against the Borg. So it makes a lot of sense, you know? And I think about the next episode where we see Hugh, which is another one of my faves. And you just see how he is, and you're like, oh crap. Like, did we really do him did we really do a good thing to Hugh, or not do a good thing to Hugh with how we treated him? Which, again, I love that we get the where are they now, because we so often do not get that with these episodes. Yes. We have the Prime suggestion that sometimes we listen to, sometimes we don't. But all the time, at the end of the day, we fly off into the sunset. And we don't know what happens to those civilizations once we leave. But when we see what's happened, now that Hugh has this individuality, then it makes us question, did this episode end on a good note or not? Was this the right thing to do or not? And then when we go forward to, and by the time we get to the end of the episode, I think we have a good sense of it. But by the time we get to the end of Picard, I mean, it's taken a whole nother left and right and twisty turn. And oh my gosh, this started all. This episode's great. Amazing. Definitely rewatch. So good. So good. So good.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's like literally nothing negative to say about this episode. Poor Hugh. All right. Well, on that note, next week we are breaking down season 5, episode 24, The Next Phase. Guys, thank you so much as always for geeking out with us, and we'll see you next week.
Bye. Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.